Hi guys, this is Nadia from Imbali Crafts, and in this tutorial I want to show you how to create these chandelier earrings. If you like my tutorials, consider subscribing to get all of the latest updates. If you like PDF tutorials, pop over to my Etsy shop or website to check out what's new. Also, if you want to share what you've made, why not join our Facebook group, which is called Wire Wrap and Jewelry Artists Worldwide. Right, let's get started. So to begin with, you can either draw a shape on paper. So I just like to doodle and try out different patterns. If you don't really like to draw, you can pop over to my Etsy shop. I do have the PDF frame for these earrings and for other tutorials that I've made available to download. There's just a small fee, so you can decide whether you'd like to use that or draw yourself. So once you have decided on the shape, you need to cut length. So what I do for these length is I generally go about 1/2 centimeter longer than I need. Now, the size and the length of wire really depends on how big the swirl is. So the bigger the swirl, the longer the wire is, and it can be quite deceptive. So rather leave quite a lot more wire than you think you will need until you get sort of the feel for how long the wire needs to be for a swirl. So what I tend to do first is I kind of flatten out the point of the wire by squeezing it with my pliers. So this is what it looks like, and then once I have rounded and shaped it, I'm going in to refine the actual shape itself. Sorry, out of shot here. So this takes a bit of time and it's quite tedious, and I recommend that you do each section, if you're doing a pair of earrings, to do each sort of component at the same time as the other one, to make sure that they are all perfectly symmetrical, because it's much easier to do this when you do the pieces at the same time. So I'm just using my pliers here to kind of shape it, and as I said, you know, this is the sort of stage that takes quite a fair bit of time, especially if you're making two. So you just need to shape and then reference back against your drawing or the PDF, whichever you chose to do. So you can see me here shaping and referencing back against the drawing, like so. So place it in and then kind of flatten it out and bend the wire on site, basically on the actual drawing, to make sure it fits. See, this wire is a little bit long. It's actually too long for the small swirl, so I need to trim it off a little bit. As you can see, I don't need much, so this swirl will roughly probably need about 1 centimeter of extra wire. And then I'm going to come in and round out the wires again to make sure it fits. So if you make it perfectly straight each time, and you can do the mirror image at the same time using the same drawing, as long as you wire them the opposing way, if that makes sense. So this is the mirror image, and basically I've made both of them at the same time to make sure they're straight. So the next step is to flatten them. Basically, I just wanted to give a little bit more detail, so I'm taking each component and I'm literally only just hammering the swirl, because I don't want the middle section to be flattened too much because of the weave. So the way I use a hammer for this is I use a dome chasing hammer, which will leave no markings on your wire, or much less markings, much less pronounced markings. And when you're hammering, you see me here moving into the direction that I want the wire to flatten out. And then for the smaller areas that are hard to reach, like the swirl on the inside, I use the other side, the sort of ball, to hammer. Just be very careful, obviously, not to hit too hard, otherwise you will distort and malform the wire. So just be gentle when hammering, and this takes patience. If you hit too hard, the wire will be distorted and it won't look right. So just hammer very softly and take your time with that. So there you go. So this is now flattened out, and again I'm moving into the direction of I want the wire to flatten out. And then remember, if you're hammering, the side you hammer on will have dents in it. You can, to an extent, file these off, but if you want a smooth side showing, make sure that you hammer on the side that is going to be at the back. So next, if you have any uneven edges, take a file and smooth these out again, like so, and this will make sure that everything, you can avoid this, or to an extent, by hammering carefully, then you don't get any unevenness. There will always be some, so I file them off. So just take your time with that and smooth it all out, and you can see this is the smooth side, which for me will be the front. And then next I like to polish everything up a little bit before I assemble, because it's much easier to polish. Obviously it will darken again quite quickly as you're touching it with the copper. It oxidizes fairly quickly, but yeah, I still do prefer to polish because I can remove any nicks or scratches much easier when the components are still loose. You can always polish it later once it's assembled to get the shine back. So just use for this, I've got these polishing pads which I bought off eBay. They're kind of offcuts. They're much better than sandpaper. I love using them because you get different grits from 800 all the way up to 2000, and they really last a long time and do not disintegrate. So I like using them. They're great. So once we've done that, I'm just going to place the components and make sure they still fit after you hammered them. So that looks okay so far, and the next step would be then to obviously wire these together. That's what it looks like. So these are obviously side by side. So I'm picking up the leftmost component and I'm going to use that to attach my wire to. So I'm only leaving about 20 centimeter tail. Not really sure what that is in inches. I need to double check that. Don't know it offhand. So we're going to bring in the next middle component, and we're wrapping around the middle component once. So keep these as closely together as you can. So that's that. Adding in the next one. So that's the last component. So we slide that in place, and we're going to wrap around this one as well. So that's once. Then we come back, go in around the middle, and then around the outside, or the first component that we've just attached. I'm going to go around this one twice. There we go. So next we're going to go around the middle and then back around the outside twice. Back around the middle and then around the other side twice. So basically the way this weave works, it's twice around the outside, once around the middle, and then twice around the outside, and keep doing this. So at any given point I then push the weaves together to make sure that everything is neat and tidy. And you just want to continue with this weave until you get to roughly the bottom. So I'm going to widen out flare the weave a little bit where the first swirl begins, the small one. So continue until you get to the flared part. I'm going to show you just now. So this is what it looks like. You can see there's a slight flare at the bottom. Oh, excuse me, I've got a frog in my throat, as we say in German. So I'm going to wrap around the flared swirl once, and this is exactly the same weave, and we continue by wrapping around the center wire and then the outside twice. And and this will create a little bit of a woven detail, which I think looks quite pretty. So what I do occasionally is I flatten out the weave so that they sit nice and flat like that, and I'm going to continue to lengthen the weave at the top as well. So I'm going to flip over the weave and continue the exact same process. So it's twice around outside, once around the middle, and twice around the other side. Repeat, once around the middle, twice around the outside, once around the middle. So it's quite repetitive, but it's actually quite a pretty weave, especially when you're using the finer wires, because it looks very detailed and delicate. So that's what it looks like. So next we need to elongate the weave with the remaining 2 wires at the bottom. I just want to do this to A, secure it further, and B, I think it looks quite nice to have some extended weaving. So to do this, it's just twice around one wire, twice around the other in a figure of 8 fashion. So super easy. Repeat until you are satisfied with the length of the weave. So twice around each wire. There you go. I could have actually cut this a bit further, but left it, alas. Right, so this is what it looks like. So next we need to bind the wires. For that you can either continue with the wire that's left over or add in a new piece, just entirely up to you. So you could have used half round for this, but I wanted the sort of binding wires to be as obscure as possible, so I opted for the 0.3 wire still instead, because I think it just looks the best. You want to hide the wire as much as possible. So the way I'm doing this is I'm wrapping the weaving wire once around or twice around the swirl, before then wrapping the weaving wire around both swirls about 3 or 4 times. That depends how many times you do that, depends on the aesthetics that you prefer. If you want less wires, you can do it twice. If you want more, you can do it 4 or even 5 times, so up to you. So once you've finished, wrap around the top swirl or the bottom swirl, depending where you started. And then shift these together and make sure they're nice and symmetrical. Flatten these out. And then obviously we're going to trim off the wires. So it's a little bit tricky. I have yet to find a trick on how to tuck away loose ends on wraps like this. If you use half round, you can kind of tuck the wires inside the gap the weave itself creates, but with this fine wire it's not really possible. So the weaves tend to be loose, which is something I don't really like, but I haven't found a solution to the problem yet, so we're going to have to live with it for now. So that's what it looks like, and then I tend to flatten it with the pliers. Trim off. That's what it looks like so far. So next we're going to be adding the beads. Now you can put the central beads if you wanted to. I'm not sure if I actually like that row of beads or not. I've just added them in because I like the detail, but you can leave them out if you want to. So the way this works is I am attaching some wire to the outside swirl 2 or 3 times. This gives me a starting point, pull this through. Next, I'm taking a large bead. So this is a 5mm bead, or 4mm. I think it's 5mm, not sure. I'll double check that. So I think it's a 5mm. So then what I'm going to do is I am slotting it in place, and then the weaving wire I'm feeding through the weave of the center column, if that makes sense. There will be big enough gaps to do this, and then I'm kind of wrapping it around itself to tighten things up. So the weaving wire wraps around itself once, and then it goes back through the weave in the middle, and then I'm going to take in a new bead. So this is basically, if you've ever done channel setting around a wire, sort of stitching gemstones or beads to the wire, if that makes any sense. It's a similar concept, except you obviously go through the weave in the middle. Now when the weaving is too tight, you can take a needle to create a bit of space and then slot these in, and then the wire should fit through. Now you can't use any thicker wire than the weaving wire that you've used for the center, otherwise it just won't fit. It would if you really press hard to make the holes, but it's best to use the same gauge wire. So you would continue with that. So obviously you can again feed it around itself. So this is quite a fiddly process, as I say quite a lot in my work. Everything is a bit fiddly. So pull that through and tighten things up, and this should make everything fairly tight, and then you would just continue adding smaller and smaller beads until you reach the bottom, and that's what it looks like on this one already. So I've added beads all over already, so you can do the same with yours. I've added one at the top here, then the one at the bottom, and I am then, to finish off, just add a little bead. Now this is obviously again preference. You can add whatever size beads you want anywhere in the design. So this is just the way I thought it looks nice. So what I'm doing is wrap around the bottom swirl. Now a little trick when you finish with these wires is that, I'm just going to wrap it around the loop again. There you go, is to actually take the weaving wire and wrap it around underneath the bead, wrap it around the bead itself, not the bead itself, but the wire that comes in from underneath. So I'm going to flatten this out. So now you can watch me here. I am taking the wire and I am wrapping it around underneath the bead, and this will ensure that the weaving wire later when you wear the earrings, it won't come undone because it's nicely tucked away. So this is what I was talking about earlier when I was attaching the different swirls. There's no solution to tuck away the loose wire ends. If you have a solution, please show me because I don't have one. But for when you're adding beads, this is what you can do, and then you cut the wires off. So next, obviously, add your chain. So I've lost it already, which is liver of sulfur. I should have done this before I added the beads because you keep the brightness of the beads. So the last step is actually attaching your drops or whatever else you have available. And the way I do this is just create a little rosary link on each end. So it's quite easy to wrap the wire around itself, and a little tail left over. This will tuck everything away, and then wrap the other tail just once or twice to tighten it. So once that's done, all we're going to do is trim off the ends like so, and then we're just going to attach these two. I'll use jump rings, so the smaller the jump rings the better, and the chain needs to be quite fine as well, so that it is just as inobscure as possible. Add your little loops, and yeah, that's that. So as much detail as you like. And that's the whole tutorial. So thank you so much for watching. I really hope you enjoyed this. As I said, don't forget to subscribe for updates. Pop over to my Etsy shop for more tutorials, or to purchase my artwork. And I would absolutely love to see you in our Facebook group, which is called Wire Wrapper and Jewelry Artists Worldwide. It would be lovely to have you. And yeah, that's it. So thank you so much for watching, and see you soon.